Welcome to the PIO Podcast. I am your host, Robert Tornabene. I have been a PIO for over 11 years with 27 years of law enforcement background. Welcome to Season 2 of the PIO Podcast. I am working hard to bring you the very most diverse crowd of subject matter experts in the public sector field. You can help grow the podcast by sharing it with friends and colleagues. Please give the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you listen to. So sit back and enjoy our next episode. Good morning. Today on the PIO Podcast, we have Crystal McCoy. She's the Public Affairs Officer for the ATF in Denver, Colorado. Crystal, welcome to the show.
Hi, Bob. Thanks for having me.
You know, I really appreciate you coming on. I was kind of in a bind, and I know our mutual friend jumped in and was able to get you to do this, so I appreciate it. But she's got you have a really interesting connection with an organization called the Emergency Services and Public Information Officers of Colorado. It's an association. Before we get into that, though, I'd like to know a little bit about your background.
Sure. So I got into law enforcement right around 1998, where I started as a police and fire dispatcher down in Florida. And I ended up in Colorado, where I finally just decided to become a sworn officer. And so I was sworn for about 17 years here in Colorado. In the final 4.5 or so years of it, I was the public information officer for the Aurora Colorado Police Department. And then I got kind of a rare opportunity to make the switch over to the federal side last year to become a PIO for the ATF Denver Field Division. And so after 17 years of sworn law enforcement, I figured it was time to try something new. And I came over here, been here about 6 or 7 months, and it's been same but different in a lot of ways. But I'm really enjoying it.
I'm sure, because the messaging that the ATF is doing is probably a little different than what you would be doing at Aurora PD, correct?
Yeah, it's very different. You know, in Aurora, you're subject to state laws, which are much more open and require a lot quicker response in a lot of areas, and a much more intrusive into personnel and also just into the public facing activities. Here, it's probably exactly what a lot of people imagine, much more restrictive. But I'm learning, with the ATF, and I do believe, because I was a task force officer with the FBI for a bit, so I've certainly been exposed to how they work. But at the ATF, I think we are kind of ahead of the game a little bit in terms of we have a lot more ability to just push some messaging out, a lot less layers of approval, if you will, that can push some messaging out. So now I'm just really trying to work on bridging that gap between the local law enforcement that I know so well and have such great relationships, and bringing them into the federal world and seeing what we can learn from each other and how we can use each other, honestly, in some ways to get some good messaging out.
Well, that's always good to try and partner up with the locals, because that's where a lot of information can flow your way and it can go back and forth. That's awesome.
Exactly.
All right, so let's talk about the Emergency Services Public Information Officers Association of Colorado. What is it about?
Yeah, so, it started in 1986, and it was kind of born out of, I imagine, not being here, a desire to just network and learn from each other and not have to continue to recreate the wheel. And it is an organization that is just emergency services responders. But honestly, we've kind of went outside of those bounds a little bit. We have people from universities, people from hospitals, all sorts of backgrounds. And we have something to learn from them. So, if you're a PIO, I really don't care so much what your background is. If you're in the corporate world, that's great, because what the real reason for this organization is to network and learn. So I could find myself very easily working with Home Depot, right? They're not an emergency responder, but I value that relationship and that friendship, because we might be doing something publicly. And then they also offer a lot of perspective. So you'll find, all sorts of backgrounds within our organization, which is membership based. That's we just invite anybody like, I don't know if this is the right thing for me. Don't be intimidated by the historical police and fire, and thinking there's nothing to be learned from it. We want you. We think we can learn from you and your background too.
Awesome. So what kind of activities does the organization support?
Really any, we don't go out and do any fundraising or anything like that. But in terms of the PIO, the activities that we really support is training. Sorry about that, is training and networking and getting to know each other. And, not just training one and done, but continuous training, right? Sometimes you've seen the training one or two times and you take a different piece, or you affirm that training. You're like, I didn't know about that. Lo and behold, you go through it and you totally agree with it from there. So, but the monthly trainings is the one thing that we're dedicated to providing to our members.
So do you, besides the training, do you do support like during critical incidents?
Yeah, that's something that has kind of evolved, and it's really a credit to the family that the PIOs have built in especially the metropolitan area, but we have well expanded to all parts of the state. So what we've seen happen, and we're trying to coordinate this a little better, but the Boulder shooting was the most recent one, and also in Lakewood there was a shooting there. So what happens is we kind of have this informal group behind the scenes on GroupMe where all the metro area PIOs communicate. And as soon as one of us hears something, and PIOs often somewhere, we're going to be the first to know, right? As soon as we hear something, we reach out. And in Lakewood and Boulder, we're like, Dion, what do you need? And sometimes we have these informal agreements. It's like, you got something in Boulder, we're going. So you got a team going, and that stands for the entire membership. If you've got something going on, we're going to hear about it. We're coming, we're reaching out. What do you need? And I know, especially in Boulder, I just had a conversation with Dion, who I know you've interviewed before. Her police officers, her command staff were just so impressed and grateful that there was such a coordinated and immediate response of communications professionals at her fingertips, allowing Dion to manage the crisis externally in the early hours, and then also being there to provide her some relief and support. And maybe the best thing of all is the people who respond to help her, they're learning, right? They may never have the direct experience, hopefully they don't, of some sort of a mass casualty incident, but now they're getting it. They're getting a better picture. And then guess what? That's training. They get to take that back and take that perspective back to their agencies and become a bigger asset to them.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Now let's talk about training that you guys have had, because you talk about training in the monthly stuff. What are some examples of the training that the organization has held?
Most recently, we had some training about open records in Colorado, and we've had a lot of legislation and changes in open records, especially surrounding body-worn cameras. And that's not exclusive to police and even fire anymore. If you think about it, emergency responders are stepping into universities, they're stepping into hospitals, they're stepping into homes, right? So we all have something to learn and be aware about with body-worn cameras and the open records laws. You got 21 days that you got to release those. And if that doesn't feel painful to you when you hear that, you haven't had body-worn cameras yet to be responsible for. That was a great training. It was by Nancy Rogers. She used to be a city attorney at Aurora. She is now over in Broomfield. And boy, does it open your eyes to that. And it also helps the PIO when they're sitting in these meetings to just help their command staff be aware, like, hey, I know we have a crisis here, but we are also going to have a lawful responsibility to getting open records out. We need to be aware of what that looks like and be prepared for what impact that has for their brand, or their agency.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
we've had that. Yeah. And we obviously have things like social media training. Something I'd really like to see, and something that's kind of touched me personally in the past year, is the importance of leadership for the PIO. And I mean that in maybe a couple different lanes, but the importance of a good relationship with your chief, your sheriff, your special agent in charge, the importance of knowing them well and knowing if you're the best person for the job with that person leading the agency. So I'm hoping to bring some sort of leadership training here shortly to the organization this year.
Oh, that would be great. The chief in Fort Collins might be a good person to head that. What's his name? I forget now.
I can't think of, I know the PIO, but I can't think of the chief.
I'm trying to think of the chief's name, because he's very big into public information. He might be a good resource for that.
Great.
I'll figure it out. Chief
yes,
Schumacher.
There you go.
There it is. I knew I would. I was just looking at something that he posted earlier today. All right. I've asked before. I did ask it, or you did mention it about membership. What does a membership in there cost per month? Is it per agency? Is it per person?
So it's an annual membership fee for the individual, only one person within an organization, it's $95. But if you bring 3 or more to the membership from your organization, then it brings it down to $75 per person. And I mean, that's nothing, right? During COVID, things got weird for everybody and everything was totally hybrid. We've reintroduced not hybrid, rather in person, I'm sorry, but we've introduced hybrid training now. So it's both in person and offered virtually. It's always a challenge every month to do that without any technological issues, because we try to take the training to many different places across the metro area. That helps with networking. It gets us out of the office, but there's different technological capabilities everywhere that we go. But in addition to the monthly trainings, we also just kind of have these media mixers. Sometimes we bring in the local media and we just come socialize, right? And I don't mean party. I mean socialize face to face, get to know each other, and maybe build some relationships with each other. And then every other year we have a really big conference out in Avon, Colorado at the Westin in Beaver Creek. Beautiful location, offers some rest and relaxation that we often need and never afford ourselves the time to do. But we bring, first class speakers, and everybody has a great time. And I am fortunate today. We finally just locked down the dates for 2023 back at the Westin. It'll be April 26th, 27th, and 28th. So another good time will be had, a lot more important training, and hopefully we can bring some new fresh training to our membership.
You just said something earlier about connecting and getting to know the relationship between the media and you, the PIO. And I think that's a one thing that sometimes PIOs overlook. And I think it goes hand in hand with, depending on the type of PIO that got put in that position. Some agencies will put that PIO, that person in that position, based on the mistaken view of, I'm going to punish somebody and they're going to have to deal with the media, which is the wrong person you want in there. But having that connection, that being able to sit down with them and just have a conversation about expectations and how you like to work and what they can expect from you, I think that's very important. And I think that's a great way of doing it, and having a mixer and having them all come in and sit down and just chat.
Yeah, it is. And, Judy Powell said this in one of the training classes. I'll never forget it. And I love it. And I might put it on my tombstone, but it says, it's hard to hate up close.
Yes.
Right. And that, whether you mean a chief talking to their people on the street, that's the importance of bridging that gap and, just building trust, to the PIO and the media. It's hard to hate up close. So go out, meet them, figure out what they're into, have coffee. I love having coffee. And, just take them to coffee and just talk and get to know them as a person, get to know what they're interested in. And, and then also let them know, like, hey, this is what I want to do. This is what, at the federal government, this is what I can offer at my level. But hey, I know this PIO over in Denver, and we can do this together, where you can have access to more information. It's just, knowing your PIOs, those important relationships, and then obviously building relationships with your media and getting to know who's out there and who you can work with and who to pitch to.
Oh my God, that's an awesome end there, the pitch, because how often do you send things out in a press release to the media, or a media release, I should say, not a press release, but you send that out and it just gets pushed away because it's, now you have that personal relationship with someone. Mm-hmm. You can pick up the phone and say, hey, I got a great idea. You might want to do this during sweep week or something along those lines.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, how boring are press releases? I'm a little shocked that they still exist the way that they do, because if you don't get the message across in 10 seconds or less, or 2 sentences or less, they're probably not going to read it. Right. So just pick up the phone, sell the ticket, so to speak. And then it always works out for me that way. And then also I know who's going to cover it. Right. And I know who's going to do a good job and who's going to give it the time and attention and perspective that it needs.
Did you have any journalism background at all? Or was this just something that was developed over your 17 years at Aurora?
I was voluntold, honestly. So I was privileged enough, and I say that now, I don't know that I appreciated it then, but I was privileged enough to be selected under now retired Chief Nick Metz, who is the COO of Code 4 Counseling here locally. And he, for whatever reason, they reached out to me and they said, do you want to be a PIO? And I literally said, what is that? And then I realized what that was. And I go, I say bad words. I don't think I'm the right person. And like any good police organization, they duped me into it. And I have a personal philosophy, never say no, right? Always take an opportunity. You have something to learn, good or bad. I get in there 90 days and they kind of like, oh, psych, you're here forever. You're permanent. And I had going in the attitude that maybe a lot of police officers who haven't really broadened their horizons yet, that I hated media. I thought they were awful. I thought they did a terrible job. And I just, I hated them. And it's a good question to ask a prospective PIO is how they feel about the media, because I've seen you're going to get the response that I probably would have given. They're terrible. They twist everything. They're awful. And then if you get someone that you really should take a look at, they're going to say, they have a job to do. I have a job to do. Our responsibility is have a good relationship with one another. And I remember in the most recent one that I recall that where we were selecting PIOs, that was a question, and that was a deal breaker. One of them hated the media, and I'm like, I don't know that we can change their mind. But someone who's mature enough that understands that there's something to be gained by having positive relationships from the media, somebody you want. It's a good foundation anyways. But then I just got stuck, and then I loved it. I love it now. And that's why I was so willing to kind of take that dangerous leap out of law enforcement, sworn law enforcement anyways, and kind of take it up the next level, see if I've got what it takes. And I'll tell you, if you have relationships and networking skills with your PIOs around you, and also your media, you've got what it takes, right? You just have to be willing to build relationships and maintain them.
Yep. You cannot sit behind a desk and expect to get what you need. I mean,
No.
you got to be able to go out there and talk to people and interact with them and have conversation.
Yeah. I mean, don't be afraid to ask, never say no, and get out and meet people face to face.
I like that question that you have, asking the prospective PIO what they're really, what their belief in is on the news media, because that's an interesting question to ask when you're selecting somebody to replace you or go into a position from a leadership perspective. I don't know. I don't think they asked me that question when I was interviewing at the different agencies I've been with.
Yeah. I mean, it immediately categorizes you as what kind of PIO you are, or maybe where you're at in your career. Right. I got lucky and they didn't ask me that question. And I was in a situation, I think a lot of agencies, even the federal government, it's kind of like PIO, who's going to do that? We don't have that. Right. And they just tap some poor soul who gets thrown into the role and doesn't develop and build that role the way that it needs to be. And then, especially in the government, they move around the United States and they lose those relationships with anywhere built. So I'm really glad to see ATF is starting to put some, like me now, civilian people into these roles. So we're more permanent, and we don't have to keep recreating the wheel with relationships, right? And then we have a lot of institutional knowledge
Exactly.
that we can, use to our benefit, honestly.
So what advice would you have for someone who wants to get into the field?
I would say because I know it's kind of hard to get into the field sometimes, right? Some people are trying to get straight into a police department, and not all police departments are open to outsiders or civilians just yet. I think that's changing, but I would say take any sort of communications role that you can, no matter what it is, and learn everything you can from it. Join organizations like ESPIOC and NIOA, National Information Officers. Networking and resources is going to always help you in this role. And then, as they say, it's not what you know, it's who you know, right? And so if you just get to know the people in the game and start attending trainings, do internships. We have scholarships available for ESPIOC, and that's because we know budgets are tight, right? And so you can apply for a scholarship if you can't afford the membership this year. And we just kind of give you some jobs to do that betters the organizations that year, and then you get the benefit of the membership. So put yourself out there, get on LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn's where it's at for communicators, I think, honestly. I mean, I get so much great information, Julie Parker. Katie Nelson,
Oh,
all
yeah.
these great people. I get so much great information on there. I think Jessica Chin, I don't know if anybody's listening or watching her, but I like the stuff that she offers on LinkedIn also. So just get up, put yourself out there and don't give up is my advice.
I agree. I'm always putting something out. I'm always doing something. It's a way to build your brand. It's also a way for you to connect with people you haven't connected with before.
Absolutely.
So what types of training or education should someone coming into the field be looking at?
From the ESPIOC?
No, just in general. Just, somebody wants to get into the field,
Sure.
education wise or training wise, what could they go out and make it easier for them?
Yeah. I mean, I think a journalism background, I mean, these are things I don't have, right? So I don't want to pigeonhole somebody and you must have a journalism degree, but I'll tell you where I think that comes into play is good storytelling ability. So any training or certifications, if that comes with your college degree, great, but writing skills, especially since so many of us are one-man bands and we're not all privileged to have, 6 pieces of pie where one's the social media expert, one's the writing expert, one's the video expert. We're often all of these things, right? But the most important thing I think is having a strong writing background. I didn't have that. I knew how to write really well, a whole bunch of police jargon and a police report, but I learned trial and error how to write something that's a little more interesting. And writing, I think it's called Persuasive Writing by Trish Hall. She's a New York Times editor, I believe, at one point. She writes a really good book. It's an easy read. And I had the books in front of me, but I had to step away, as you know. But I think it's Writing to Persuade by Tricia Hall. Great book. She talks about how to get past the op-ed people, which means you've learned how to write a story in a way that people are going to want to read it and publish it. Right.
Nice.
But hey, I come with a criminal justice background and bachelor's. I would say all of my experience was on the job training. And I don't think that's a bad thing because this field changes every day. And I might be more up to speed now than the reporters, right? A lot of reporters are coming out of the news media, becoming PIOs. And that's a great thing to have. But they're going to have some things to learn, right?
Absolutely. And they, one of the reasons they're leaving journalism is because they don't pay for anything. I mean, I have a daughter that is a digital executive producer with a NBC station up in Wisconsin, and she's not making the greatest amount of money. She's doing a little better this year, but she started out, she was making less than $15 an hour for a 4-year college degree. I mean, not good.
Yeah, no, it's not good. It's really not good. One thing I noticed, and we were talking about kicking this training around, is I noticed what are reporters struggling with that are coming to the dark side, if you will, or transitioning into public information for a government entity. And I think one thing I'm seeing, and a few of them who I love and respect, is turning off the investigative mindset for the purpose of public information and learning how to kind of take your skills and retrain your brain to something that you can actually put out, right? So many times they're still asking these very interrogative questions. And I'm like, well, that's great, but what's that do for me, what I can put out right now? That's what you could put on the news before. Right. That's not what we can do right now.
Right. Yep, absolutely. All right, let's change this up a little bit. We're going to go into a couple of rapid fire questions for you.
Okay.
Favorite sport and team?
Colorado Avalanche, hands down.
Chocolate or vanilla?
Chocolate.
What is a must-read book in your mind?
Politics of Crisis, by Eric. Yeah, good book.
Yep, I'm still reading it, but yeah, great book. If you could have coffee with any historic figure, who would you choose?
That would be my 3rd great grandfather. And that's only because I'm a genealogy nerd and I can't find any records on this man. So I want to know more about him.
That's interesting. Okay. Favorite drink of choice?
Oh, it's definitely coffee. 100%.
Is there a favorite store or company or something you like, or is it just coffee?
Yeah. Black Rifle Coffee. I love it.
I love Black Rifle Coffee. Yep.
Yeah. The CAF coffee. That's my favorite.
Okay. Excellent. And what would be your superpower if you could get one?
just to rewind, right? I mean, I would love to be able to just go back and do a couple things again, do it different. Maybe some things not different. There's still a crisis or a catastrophe, but I wish I could just rewind time a little bit.
That's an interesting one. I have not heard that one yet. That's awesome. I like that. All right, Crystal, final thoughts. Anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I would just really encourage people to, we have really stressful jobs, and we are sponges. We absorb crisis, we absorb trauma, and we are often really hard on ourselves, and we burn the candle on both ends way too much. And if there's anything I could say is stop, open your calendar and schedule a me day, and don't let anyone violate it. Put some boundaries in place, right? Yes, Chief, I know this feels like the biggest thing in the world, but I know that we can wait until Monday. This is a me day. Maybe don't say it's a me day. They won't respect that always, but mental health matters. You've got to take care of yourself and sleep. I mean, I could go on and a whole nother show with you on this, but sleep, taking care of yourself, carving time out for you, and relationships. And I don't mean in the PIO world anymore. I mean your family. Yep. Give your family the time that they need to be with you. And remember, they're the ones that are there at the end. So take care of them today, and don't let this career drive you in the grounds. And I'm coming from a personal perspective there. So take care of yourselves. That's my final message. Excellent.
Crystal, how can people connect with you if they'd like to reach out or learn more about the ESPIOCO?
Yeah, you're close. ESPIOC.org. Or you can just Google emergency services, Colorado. It'll pop up. I'm personally on LinkedIn under Crystal McCoy. You can find me there. You can call me 303-601-6099, phone, texts, and email crystal.mccoy@atf.gov. But, definitely check us out on LinkedIn. We're really building up that profile. We're seeing a lot of people really like just seeing what we got there, and we put out some information out there. So just join us, give me a call, shoot me a text. If there's anybody that's got a presentation they would love to give to our people here, give me a call and we'll get that set up.
Outstanding. Great to know, Crystal. I appreciate you coming on the show last minute. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good day.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you would like to contact the show, please email us at thepiopodcast@gmail.com. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast to get notified of the latest episode. If you are listening on a platform that allows reviews, please give us a review. We appreciate any review, good or bad. It helps us improve on each episode. Until next time, be safe.